The city streets were quiet at night. Tall buildings stood like silent giants, their windows glowing with faint light. The roads were nearly empty. A few cars passed by once in a while, and the sound of their engines echoed in the cool air. Paul walked slowly along the sidewalk. He had just finished his long shift at the factory. His shoulders were tired, and his steps were heavy, but he was used to it. Every night was the same for him. He worked hard, came home late, and dreamed about a better life that never seemed to arrive. He turned into a narrow street that cut across his usual path home. This alley was not pretty. The walls were stained with years of dust, and broken trash bins lined the way. Most people avoided it, but Paul liked shortcuts. It saved him time, and he was not the kind of man who got scared easily. As he walked, he heard something unusual. A faint sound reached his ears. At first, he thought it was a cat. The sound was soft, almost like a whimper. He stopped and listened carefully. The cry came again. This time it was clearer, and Paul realized it was not a cat. It was something else. It sounded almost like a baby. His heart tightened. A baby? In this place? That could not be right. Paul stepped closer to the dark corner where the sound came from. He pushed aside a broken bin that smelled of old food. His eyes widened when he saw what lay inside. There was a small figure wrapped in torn cloth. The figure glowed faintly, a soft light coming from its skin. Paul blinked hard, thinking his eyes were tricking him. But no, the glow was real. The little one inside was not a human baby. Its skin was pale blue, and its eyes, half open, shimmered like silver. Tiny arms moved weakly as if searching for comfort. Paul froze. His mind raced with questions. Was this a trick? Was it some strange toy? But then the small creature let out another cry. The sound was full of pain and hunger. It was alive. Paul reached into the bin with trembling hands. He lifted the little being into his arms. The glow brightened slightly, and the baby gave a soft sigh as if it felt safer. Paul looked around quickly, expecting someone to appear, but the alley was empty. He felt torn inside. A part of him wanted to run away. This was not normal. This was not human. Who knew what trouble this could bring? But another part of him, a stronger part, could not leave the small child to die in the trash. He had seen suffering before. He had seen hungry children begging near the market. He remembered how his younger sister had once cried from hunger when they were kids. His heart would not let him walk away. The baby shivered in his arms. Paul removed his own jacket and wrapped it around the child. The glow dimmed a little, as if the warmth calmed it. He looked down at the little face, and the tiny silver eyes blinked up at him before closing again. Paul whispered softly, "It's okay. I got you." He took a step back, still holding the baby, when he felt a presence. His eyes darted to the shadows at the far end of the alley. For a moment, he thought he saw movement. A figure stood there, half hidden behind the wall. The figure was tall, thin, and strange, its shape not like any human. Paul's heart pounded. He held the baby closer. The figure did not come forward. It just watched him. He could not see its face clearly, but he felt its sadness. The air carried a heavy silence, broken only by the faint sound of the baby's breathing. Paul called out, "Is this your child?" The figure did not answer. It stayed in the shadows, trembling slightly. Paul could sense fear. Whoever that was, they were scared of him. He did not move closer. He simply stood there, holding the baby, waiting. But after a moment, the figure turned and slipped deeper into the darkness, disappearing from sight. Paul stood still for a long time, staring at the place where the figure had been. He did not know what to think. Why would someone leave a baby like this? Why abandon it in the trash? He looked down at the baby again. It was so small, so fragile, yet still breathing. The thought of leaving it behind made him feel sick. He knew what he had to do. Paul pulled his jacket tighter around the baby and started walking again. His steps were quicker now. He wanted to get home fast. The night air grew colder, but he did not care. His mind was filled with questions. Who were these beings? Why were they here? And what was he supposed to do with this child? When he finally reached his small apartment, he carefully unlocked the door and went inside. The room was dim and simple. A worn couch stood against the wall, a table in the middle, and a bed in the corner. He gently placed the baby on the couch and adjusted the jacket around it. The baby stirred, letting out a small whine. Paul frowned. The child was hungry. But what could he feed it? He opened his fridge. There was little inside, some bread, a bit of milk, and leftover soup. He grabbed the milk and poured it into a cup. Then he found a small spoon. He dipped the spoon into the milk and brought it close to the baby's mouth. For a moment, he worried it would not work. But the baby's lips opened, and it drank. Slowly, carefully, Paul fed the child spoon by spoon. With each sip, the baby grew calmer. Paul felt relief wash over him. The baby was alive, and for now, it was safe. He sat on the floor beside the couch, watching it sleep under his jacket. Outside, the city was still and quiet, but Paul knew life had changed for him forever. The night was heavy with silence. Far beyond the alley, hidden between shadows, the mother of the glowing baby watched from a distance. Her thin arms trembled, and her eyes, wide and filled with sadness, followed the human who carried her child away. Her name was Myra. She was not like the people of the city. Her body was tall and slender, her skin a soft pale blue, and her eyes glimmered like silver under the faint light of the street. But her beauty had faded beneath hunger, fear, and exhaustion. She had not wanted to leave her child in that bin. Her heart had fought against the thought, but her body was too weak, and her mind too broken from worry. She had carried her baby for many long days, searching for food among streets where people gave her only cold stares. Every time she stepped forward, humans would freeze, point, or run away. None of them listened when she tried to speak. The child had cried without end. Its small body grew weaker. Myra had tried to nurse her baby, but her own strength was gone. She had eaten nothing for days, and her body had no more to give. When she placed her baby in the trash bin, her heart tore apart. She had whispered a promise in her language, a sound soft and filled with pain. She told her baby that she loved her. She told her baby she hoped someone kind would hear the cry. Myra had planned to stay near, to watch from the shadows. But she had not expected a human to stop. When she saw Paul pick up her baby, she felt shock. He had not run. He had not turned away in fear. He had held the child with care, wrapping it in his jacket as if it were his own. Myra's eyes filled with tears she had no strength to wipe away. She wanted to step forward. She wanted to cry out and beg for help. But fear locked her in place. She had seen humans before. Some had looked at her with anger. Some had thrown stones. She still carried scars on her thin arms from their fear. She did not know this man. Would he hurt her? Would he take her baby and then throw it aside when he saw it was different? The fear was too strong, so she stayed in the shadows, her heart pounding with every step he took. When he walked away carrying her baby, Myra's knees weakened. She pressed her back to the wall and slid down to the cold ground. Her face buried into her hands as she wept quietly. She wanted to follow him but did not dare. She wanted to trust but did not know how. For a long time, Myra sat there, staring at the empty bin where her child had once rested. The world felt heavy and cruel. She thought about her journey to this planet. Her ship had been small, a vessel built for travel but not for battle. She had fled from a dying world, carrying her baby with her, hoping to find a safe place. The stars had guided her here. But safety had not been what she found. Instead, she had found hunger. The air here was different, the food was strange, and her body could not eat much of what humans ate. She had survived on scraps, but even those were hard to find. She had wandered the streets at night, hiding by day, always trying to protect her child. Each day the baby grew weaker, and each day her own strength faded. Now, with her child gone in the arms of a stranger, Myra felt both despair and a spark of hope. Something in the man's face had seemed different. His eyes had not been filled with fear or anger. His hands had not been cruel. They had been gentle. She rose slowly from the ground. Her legs shook, and her body leaned against the wall for support. She took a few steps down the alley, her eyes searching the path where the man had gone. She wanted to follow but could not. If she followed too closely, he might notice her. If he noticed her, he might reject her. The thought of him pushing her away while holding her baby filled her heart with dread. So Myra stayed back. She followed at a distance, moving slowly, her body half hidden by shadows. She trailed him until she saw him enter a small apartment. The door closed behind him, and light glowed faintly from inside. She stopped there, across the street, her body pressed against a cold wall. She watched the window with tired eyes. She could see faint movement inside, though the curtains blocked most of the view. Her child was in there. The man was inside too. She had to trust for now. Myra sank down to sit on the ground again. Her arms wrapped around her knees, and she rocked herself gently, whispering the name of her baby in her soft voice. She could not sleep. Fear and hope battled in her heart. Hours passed. The street grew colder. Myra pulled the torn cloth around her shoulders and closed her eyes for moments at a time, but never fully rested. Every time her eyes shut, she saw images of her baby crying alone. She forced herself awake again, staring at the window, waiting for a sign. In her mind, memories returned. She remembered the stars of her home world, the sound of rivers, and the songs her people used to sing at night. She remembered her partner who had been lost before the journey. She remembered the promise she had made, to protect her child at all costs. That promise was the only reason she still fought to live. Now that promise depended on the stranger. A human man she had never met. A human who had picked up her baby instead of turning away. Myra whispered into the night, not sure if the stars could hear her. She whispered thanks and prayers, asking for strength. The night ended slowly. The first light of dawn touched the tops of the buildings. The city began to stir with the sound of footsteps and cars. Myra pulled her torn cloth tighter and slipped deeper into the shadows, hiding herself from the people who now filled the streets. But even as she hid, Her eyes stayed fixed on that small apartment. She did not know what would come next. All she knew was that her heart was no longer completely broken. Her child was alive. Her child was not alone. And somewhere inside, she hoped the man who carried her baby would show the kindness she had almost stopped believing in. Inside the small apartment, Paul sat on the floor beside the couch. The baby, wrapped in his jacket, slept peacefully after drinking milk spoon by spoon. Its soft glow lit the room like a tiny lamp. Paul had never seen anything like it, but the sight filled him with warmth instead of fear. He leaned back against the wall and let out a slow breath. His mind was full of questions. What was this child? Where had it come from? And why had someone left it in a trash bin? The thought made his chest tighten. He could not understand how anyone could abandon a child, no matter how strange it looked. The baby stirred in its sleep, and Paul reached out gently, adjusting the jacket around its small body. He spoke in a soft voice, "Don't worry, little one. You're safe now." As he watched, he noticed the glow on the baby's skin shift. It pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Paul felt a strange calmness when he looked at it. He did not know why, but he felt connected to this child. Hours passed, and dawn arrived. The sun rose, sending golden light through the window. Paul rubbed his eyes and stood up. He needed to think. He could not keep this a secret forever. What if someone found out? But when he looked back at the baby, sleeping soundly, his heart made the choice for him. He would protect it, no matter what. Just as he turned toward the kitchen, he felt something. A presence. The hair on his neck rose. He looked toward the window, and there she was. A tall figure stood near the building across the street, hidden partly by shadows. He recognized her shape from the alley. It was the mother. For a moment, their eyes met. Even from that distance, Paul could see the sorrow in her silver eyes. She looked thin, tired, and afraid. She took a small step back as if ready to run. Paul raised a hand slowly, not to scare her. He opened the window and called softly, "It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you." The woman froze. Her hands trembled, and she glanced around like a hunted animal. But when she looked back at him, her gaze fell on the baby inside. Her lips parted slightly, and her whole body shook with emotion. Paul realized then that she was not a stranger to the child. She was the mother. His chest tightened as he thought about the despair she must have felt to leave her baby behind. He spoke again, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Your child is safe. I gave it milk. It's sleeping now." Tears shone in her silver eyes, though she tried to hide them. For a moment, she stepped closer, but then she stopped, fear pulling her back. Paul could see she was torn. He thought quickly. She looked starved. He hurried into his kitchen, took a piece of bread, and filled a cup with water. Then he went back to the window and placed them outside the door. He did not force her to come in. He simply said, "For you. Take it. Please." The woman did not move at first. She stared at the food with suspicion, as if it might be a trick. But hunger pressed her forward. Slowly, carefully, she approached the door, keeping her eyes on him the whole time. Her movements were shaky, unsteady, but she reached the bread and water. Paul stepped back to give her space. She picked them up, her thin fingers trembling. She sniffed the bread before taking a cautious bite. Her body shook as she chewed, and she drank the water in quick gulps. Paul felt his chest tighten again. She was starving. She must have gone without food for days. He realized then how desperate she must have been when she left the baby in the trash. It was not because she did not love her child. It was because she thought she could not keep it alive. After eating, the woman looked at him again. Her lips moved, and a soft sound came out. The words were broken, strange, but he could understand enough. She was trying to say thank you. Paul smiled gently. You don't need to thank me. Your baby needed help. That's all. The woman's eyes softened. She stepped a little closer, though still hesitant. She looked through the window, her gaze falling on the baby wrapped in his jacket. Her lips trembled. She wanted to reach out, but she did not dare enter. Paul understood her fear. Slowly, he picked up the baby and held it toward the window so she could see more clearly. The baby blinked, half awake, and let out a small sound. The mother's hand pressed against the window glass, her eyes filling with tears. The baby reached out a tiny arm as if sensing her presence. Paul's heart ached at the sight. He opened the door and said softly, "Come inside. It's safe. I promise." For a long moment, the woman stood frozen. Her body leaned forward, then back, as if she fought with herself. Finally, with slow steps, she crossed the threshold. Her eyes never left the baby. Paul watched carefully. He kept his movements gentle, letting her see he meant no harm. He handed the baby to her, and as soon as it touched her arms, her whole body shook. She hugged the child close, whispering soft words in her own tongue. The baby glowed brighter, comforted by its mother's touch. Paul stood silently, giving them space. The sight moved him deeply. He had never seen love so raw, so desperate, yet so strong. After a long while, the mother looked at him again. Her voice was quiet, broken, but she managed to speak. "Myra." She pointed to herself. "Myra." Paul nodded. "Myra. That's your name." He pointed to himself. "Paul." She repeated it slowly, "Paul." A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen from her. She looked down at her baby and whispered another name, one he could not fully understand. Paul did not ask her to repeat it. He only nodded, showing respect. The three of them sat in the small room, silent but connected. Paul realized then that kindness had built a bridge between them. They were not the same. Their worlds were different. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the hungry mother who now had food. What mattered was the baby who no longer cried in the cold. What mattered was that a human had chosen to care instead of turn away. And deep inside, Paul knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than he could imagine. The small apartment was quiet. The morning sun filled the room with soft light. Myra sat on the couch, holding her baby close against her chest. The child's glow spread across her arms, giving her tired face a gentle shine. Paul sat on a chair across from her, watching silently. For the first time since he had found the baby, Paul felt that things were calmer. The mother was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was here, sitting in his home, looking more human than alien in the way she cared for her child. He could see how much she loved it, how tightly she held it, how her eyes softened whenever the baby moved. After some time, Paul decided it was time to talk. He wanted to understand. He leaned forward and spoke in a gentle voice. "Myra. I want to know. Where did you come from?" Myra looked up, her silver eyes shining in the light. She opened her mouth, but her words were broken, heavy with an accent. Far, stars, broken ship. Paul frowned, trying to piece it together. You came from the stars? Your ship is broken. She nodded slowly. Her hands clutched the baby tighter as if the memory hurt her. She lowered her head and whispered, crash, fire, alone. Paul felt a heaviness in his chest. He could imagine it. A ship falling through the sky, breaking apart, leaving this woman and her child stranded on a strange world. No family, no friends, no food. Just fear and survival. He asked softly, no one else? Only you. Myra hesitated. Her lips trembled, and her eyes glistened. Others, gone. Only me, and child. Her voice cracked at the last word, and she pressed her face against the baby's head, hiding her tears. Paul sat back, unsure what to say. He wanted to comfort her, but he knew words might not be enough. Still, he tried. I'm sorry, Myra. That must have been so hard. Myra lifted her head slowly. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at him. Hard, yes. Hungry. Fear. No help. Paul remembered the way she had eaten the bread and water the night before. She had been starving. He shook his head, angered by the thought that no one had tried to help her. Maybe they had seen her and been too afraid. Maybe they had not cared. But that was not right. He stood and walked to the kitchen. He brought out more food, bread, soup, and a bit of fruit. He placed it on the table and said, eat. You need strength. Myra stared at the food, then at him. Her eyes filled again, but this time not with sorrow. She nodded and began to eat slowly, carefully. Between bites, she looked up at him. Why? You help. Paul paused. He leaned against the table and thought about her question. Why was he helping? He could have walked away in the alley. He could have pretended he never heard the cry. But he had not. Something inside him would not let him. Finally, he said, because you needed it? Because your baby needed it? I couldn't leave you like that. Not when I could do something. Myra stared at him for a long time. Her silver eyes searched his face as if trying to understand what kind of human he was. Slowly, she whispered, kind, human. The words touched Paul more deeply than he expected. He smiled a little. I'm just doing what's right. The baby let out a small sound, drawing their attention. Myra adjusted the cloth around her child and whispered the name softly. It was a sound Paul could not fully repeat, but it carried warmth. He asked gently, that's the baby's name? Myra nodded, rocking the child. Yes. My child. Paul smiled again. It's a beautiful name. The day passed slowly. Myra rested on the couch with her baby while Paul went about simple tasks, washing dishes, tidying the room, checking his small garden outside. Each time he glanced back inside, he saw Myra watching him quietly. She seemed cautious but no longer as afraid as before. Later in the afternoon, Paul sat again near her. He wanted to know more, and he could see she wanted to share. He pointed at the stars painted on an old map he kept on the wall. Myra. You're home. Where? She followed his finger and then pointed upward toward the sky. Far, very far. Bright sun. Blue water. Her words were simple, but her eyes softened with memory. She tried again, forming broken sentences. Home, green trees. Warm air. Songs. My people sing. Paul listened carefully, imagining her world. He could almost see it through her eyes, a place of beauty, now gone from her. He nodded slowly. It sounds wonderful. Her smile was small but real. For the first time, she seemed less weighed down by fear. She touched her chest gently and said, "Myra. Mother." Then she touched the baby. "Child." Finally, she pointed to Paul. "Friend." The word struck him deeply. He was a stranger to her, yet she called him friend. He felt a warmth spread through his chest. He gave a small nod. "Yes, friend." As evening came, Paul made a simple meal. He placed more food before her. She hesitated at first, but then ate with more trust. After she finished, she sat quietly, her baby asleep in her arms. The glow of the child filled the room with a soft light, brighter now, almost as if it reflected Myra's growing strength. Paul leaned back in his chair, watching the scene before him. A tired mother, a glowing baby, and the silence of a strange but peaceful moment. He thought about how unusual his life had suddenly become. Just a day ago, everything was normal. Now he was sharing his home with beings from the stars. Yet he did not feel regret. Instead, he felt something else. Purpose. As if helping them had given his life new meaning. Before lying down to rest, Paul looked at Myra and said, "You're safe here. I'll help you. Both of you." Myra's eyes shone as she whispered back, "Safe. With friend." And in that simple exchange, trust began to grow between them. Days passed slowly, but the apartment began to feel less empty. Myra stayed mostly inside, tending to her child, while Paul went about his daily routine. Though the room was small, it had warmth now. The baby's soft glow lit every corner, and Myra's presence added a sense of life that had been missing before. Paul noticed subtle changes in Myra. At first, she had been silent, fearful, and hesitant to move around. She barely spoke and avoided eye contact. But as the hours passed, she began to relax. She learned to trust that Paul would not harm her or her child. She started helping with small tasks, cleaning the apartment and preparing simple meals, often using the few ingredients Paul kept. Paul watched her quietly as she worked. He admired her patience and care. Even though she was far from her home, she had an inner strength. He felt a growing respect for her courage and the love she carried for her baby. Each small action, each gentle touch she gave the child, revealed her devotion and determination to survive. One morning, Paul found Myra sitting by the window with the baby in her arms. The child's glow shone softly across the room, and Myra's silver eyes followed it like she was memorizing every movement. She hummed a soft melody, broken and strange, but full of feeling. Paul paused in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, but also drawn by the peaceful sound. "You sing to the baby?" he asked gently. Myra looked up and nodded. "Yes. Song. Baby-like song." Paul smiled. "It is beautiful. You have a gift." She tilted her head slightly, unsure of the word gift, but she understood the kindness in his tone. Myra's lips curved into a small smile, and for a moment, the room was filled with a quiet peace. As the days continued, Myra learned more about Paul's world. He showed her how to use the stove safely, how to prepare the food he had stored, and even how to take care of small plants in his balcony garden. At first, she watched quietly, absorbing everything. Then, slowly, she began to try things herself. Sometimes she failed. The soup boiled over or she dropped a spoon, but Paul only laughed softly and encouraged her. "You are learning," he said. "That is good." Myra smiled shyly. "Learn. Strong. Child safe." Paul nodded. He understood. Her words were simple, but the meaning was clear. She wanted to be strong for her child. Every step she took, every small success, built trust between them. Paul realized that trust was not something that could be rushed. It grew slowly, like the small plants on his balcony, nurtured by patience and care. Evenings became a special time for all three of them. Paul would sit on the floor while Myra fed her baby. She often sang softly, and sometimes the baby cooed or reached out tiny arms toward him. Paul laughed quietly at the baby's gestures, and Myra's eyes softened when she saw his joy. She began to understand that humans, like herself, could be kind and reliable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Myra spoke for the first time about her journey in more detail. She told Paul how their ship had been attacked by violent storms while traveling between worlds. She described how she had clung to her child as the ship fell, how they had survived the crash, and how she had wandered through strange lands searching for food. Her voice shook as she spoke, but she spoke because she trusted Paul. Paul listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He only nodded and offered a soft word of encouragement when her voice faltered. When she finished, he reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are very brave, Myra. I admire you," he said. Myra looked at him, eyes wide. No one had ever told her that before. No one had ever praised her courage. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not cry. She only nodded, a small smile breaking through her fear. Trust, Paul realized, was not only about safety. It was about understanding, about showing respect for someone else's struggles, and recognizing the strength they carried even when it was hidden. He had earned Myra's trust, but he also felt that he had learned from her courage as well. Days turned into weeks, and the apartment began to feel like a home. Myra and her child were no longer silent or afraid. Myra laughed softly when the baby did something new, like grasping her finger or cooing at a moving shadow. Paul laughed too, sharing in the joy. He began to see the child not just as a glowing alien baby, but as a symbol of hope. The baby had survived hardship, and now it thrived because of care and kindness. One afternoon, Myra tried to play a small game with her baby. She held it up gently and let it reach for her face. Paul watched as the baby's tiny hands touched Myra's glowing skin, and she laughed softly. The sound was musical, delicate, and full of relief. She had survived, and her child had survived, and together they could feel joy again. Paul realized that these moments were as important as anything else. Survival alone was not enough. There had to be connection, love, and trust. Myra had begun to heal not only because she had food and shelter, but because she had someone who cared. Sometimes, Myra would look at Paul with curiosity, trying to understand him. She asked questions about his world, why humans worked long hours, why the city was so loud, and what food they liked. Paul answered patiently, sometimes showing her pictures from his old books, sometimes explaining simple stories about human life. Myra absorbed everything eagerly. She wanted to understand the world her child now lived in, and she wanted to trust it fully. One night, Paul sat near the couch while Myra slept, the baby tucked safely against her chest. He looked at them and felt a quiet pride. Myra had begun to trust him completely. She no longer feared being inside his home, and her child slept peacefully under her care. The bond they shared now was strong and growing. Paul understood that their relationship had become more than just protection. It was friendship, trust, and mutual respect. He whispered softly to himself, "We will make it. All of us." Myra stirred in her sleep, her tiny smile gentle as she held her baby. Paul watched her for a long time, thinking about how far they had come in such a short time. The journey had been hard, full of fear and uncertainty, but now there was hope. Trust had been built, and with it came strength. And in that small apartment, in a quiet city filled with strangers, 3 lives had begun to intertwine. Paul had given them safety and care. Myra had begun to heal and grow strong for her child. And the baby, glowing softly in its mother's arms, thrived because of the kindness and trust that surrounded it. The days of calm did not last forever. Myra, her baby, and Paul had grown comfortable in the small apartment, but the quiet city had a way of hiding dangers. One evening, as the sun sank low behind the buildings, strange lights appeared in the sky. They were not the stars or planes that Myra had seen before. These lights moved with purpose, casting long shadows across the streets. Myra's silver eyes widened. She pressed her child close, feeling a wave of fear she had hoped would never return. The lights were familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. They were alien ships, others from her world. She had hoped that no one would find her and her baby after the crash. She had hoped to remain hidden, but now they had come. Paul noticed her sudden tension. "Myra, what is it?" he asked gently, stepping closer. Myra whispered softly, almost trembling. "They come. My people, search. Punish, weak." Paul's heart sank. He had not expected this. He had thought the danger was over. Now, the woman and the child he had grown to care for were in real peril. He could see her fear clearly. Myra's hands gripped her child, her face pale under the soft glow of the baby. Paul stepped forward, speaking in calm, steady words. "Myra, listen. I will not let them take you or your baby. I promise." She looked at him with wide eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear was strong. "They, strong. Me, weak." Paul shook his head. "Strength is not only about power. It is about courage. You have courage. I have courage. Together, we are stronger than they think." Myra looked away, unsure if it could be true. Paul sensed her doubt. He needed to act. He grabbed a small flashlight and went to the window. The lights above grew brighter, descending slowly toward the city. Shadows danced on the walls as the ships moved closer. He could see figures inside the ships, tall and strange, but similar in shape to Myra. They were scanning the streets, searching for something. He knew they were looking for Myra and her child. His mind raced, but he stayed calm. Panic would not help them. Myra whispered to her child in a low voice, her words soft and trembling. She tried to shield it from the threat, though she could not hide her own fear. Paul knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her arm. "They will not find you here," he said. "We will protect each other." For hours, they watched as the ships moved slowly above the city. Myra clutched her baby, whispering promises in her language. Paul tried to reassure her with soft words. He suggested ways to stay hidden, keep the lights off, close the windows, and remain quiet. Every action was deliberate. He made sure Myra and the baby were safe while he thought of a plan. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the wall outside. Paul's heart leaped. One of the searchers was near. Myra gasped and pressed the baby tighter against her chest. Paul held up his hand to calm her. "Stay calm. Do not move." The figure paused, scanning the building. Paul held his breath, hoping the shadow would pass. The figure tilted its head, then moved along, disappearing into the night. Myra's shoulders shook with relief, and she whispered softly, "Too close." Paul nodded. "Yes. But we are ready. If they come inside, I will protect you and the baby." She looked at him with fear mixed with hope. Myra realized that this human, who had been a stranger only a few days ago, was now her protector. She felt a warmth she had not known since the crash. He was brave, calm, and willing to risk himself for them. The next day, Paul prepared more carefully. He gathered supplies, moved furniture to block windows, and created a safe space in a corner of the apartment. Myra watched, learning quickly, trying to help even though her fear remained. She wanted to contribute, to feel capable. She realized she had allies now, and that courage was contagious. By nightfall, the ships returned. Their lights cut across the sky, searching every street with precision. Myra stayed close to Paul and her child. Every sound from above made her jump, but Paul remained calm. He whispered encouragement, telling her to breathe slowly and trust him. Finally, a small ship descended near the building. Figures emerged, moving carefully, scanning the surroundings. Myra pressed herself to the floor, covering the baby. Paul stood in front of her, his stance firm but non-threatening. The aliens paused. One stepped forward, pointing toward Myra and the baby. Paul spoke in a firm, clear voice. "Stop. They are under my protection. You will not harm them." The figure tilted its head, speaking in a low tone that Myra recognized. It was her language, but the words were sharp, commanding. Myra felt fear rise again. She whispered, "Punish, weak." Paul did not move closer. He kept his hands visible, showing he meant no attack. He spoke again, calmly but with authority. "They are safe. You have no right to take them. I will not let you harm them." For a tense moment, the air was silent except for the soft hum of the ship above. Myra watched, her heart pounding, as Paul faced beings far stronger than him. He was human, fragile compared to them, but he stood tall and steady. His courage was clear. The figures hesitated. One of them stepped back, seemingly questioning the other. Myra realized that Paul's bravery had created doubt in their minds. They had expected her to be powerless, but now they faced someone willing to fight for her and her child. After a long pause, the leader of the group motioned to retreat. Slowly, the figures returned to their ship, and the lights above dimmed as the vessel rose into the sky. Myra's knees weakened, and she sank to the floor, clutching her child. Paul knelt beside her, holding her hand. "They are gone," he said softly. "You and your baby are safe now." Tears filled Myra's eyes. She had feared this day, and now it was over. She pressed her face against her child, whispering words of relief and gratitude. She looked at Paul, unable to find the words to express her thanks. She had witnessed something incredible, a human willing to protect her and her baby against impossible odds. Paul smiled gently. "We face danger together. That is what matters." Myra nodded slowly. Her eyes shone with a mix of relief, awe, and trust. She realized that this human had not only saved her child but had given them both hope. Courage could come in many forms, and today she had seen it clearly. The night returned to quiet. Myra sat with her child in her arms, and Paul remained nearby. The city continued its rhythm outside, but inside the apartment, a new sense of safety had formed. Myra knew that whatever challenges came next, she had someone to trust. And in that small, simple apartment, trust and courage had grown stronger than fear. The morning after the threat had passed, the apartment was filled with a quiet calm. Myra sat on the couch with her baby resting safely in her arms. The soft glow from the child spread across the room, casting a gentle light on the walls. Paul moved carefully around the small space, preparing a simple breakfast for them. Myra watched him closely. She had learned to trust him completely now. His courage the night before had left a deep impression. He had faced beings far stronger than himself to protect her and her child. That bravery had shown her something important: humans could be more than she had imagined. They could be kind, courageous, and selfless. Paul set a small plate of bread and fruit before her and smiled. "Eat. You need energy for today." She hesitated for a moment, then took the food. Her hands shook slightly, but she ate slowly, savoring each bite. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft coo. Myra smiled, her face brightening for the first time in what felt like weeks. After breakfast, Paul and Myra sat together, watching the baby sleep. Paul spoke quietly. "Myra, they might come back someday, but we are ready. We are strong now." Myra nodded slowly. She pressed her child close, feeling a deep connection to both Paul and the baby. She had come to understand that strength did not only come from power or numbers. True strength came from courage, love, and trust. Paul had shown her all three in abundance. Hours passed, and Myra began to speak more freely about her world. She described the blue oceans, green forests, and bright suns of her home planet. She spoke of the songs her people sang at night, the festivals, and the laughter of children. Paul listened with fascination. He had never imagined worlds like hers could exist, full of beauty and life. She told him of her journey to this planet, of the storms that had damaged her ship, and of the lonely nights spent searching for food. Her voice trembled at times, but she spoke because she trusted Paul completely. He did not interrupt, he only nodded and encouraged her. When she finished, Paul reached out gently. "You are stronger than you know, Myra. You survived storms, hunger, fear. You protected your child. That is bravery." Myra looked at him with shining eyes. No one had ever recognized her strength before. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, friend." Paul smiled. "We are more than friends. We are family now. I will help you both always." Myra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since the crash, she believed that they could have a future. Her child would be safe, and they would not live in fear again. That evening, they prepared for the possibility of the other aliens returning. Paul suggested small changes to the apartment shutters for the windows, a hidden corner where Myra and her child could rest, and ways to signal each other if danger approached. Myra helped willingly. She wanted to be strong, not just for herself but for her baby. As they worked together, Myra realized something important. Humans, despite their differences from her people, had hearts that could shine brightly. Paul's courage had saved them, but his kindness had made them feel welcome and safe. She had feared the world would never understand them, but now she saw that understanding could exist even between beings from different planets. Night came, and the baby slept soundly in Myra's arms. Paul sat nearby, watching them with a quiet sense of pride. He thought about how far they had come in such a short time. Fear had filled their first nights together, but now there was trust, hope, and a new beginning. Suddenly, a sound outside drew their attention. Myra tensed, her eyes wide. Paul stood immediately. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We will see." They approached the window carefully. The lights of the alien ships appeared again, but this time, they did not descend aggressively. The figures moved slowly, scanning the city, but when they saw Paul standing firm, they paused. Myra watched from behind him, her heart racing. Paul spoke clearly, his voice steady. "We are not afraid. You cannot take them. They are under my protection." For a tense moment, the aliens remained still. Myra could feel their scrutiny, their judgment. But Paul's courage and unwavering stance seemed to surprise them. They had expected fear, but what they found was strength and care. Slowly, the figures signaled each other and retreated back to their ship. The lights disappeared into the sky, leaving the city in quiet darkness. Myra sank to the floor, holding her baby close. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of relief. Paul knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It is over for now. You are safe." She looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Safe, because, you." Paul shook his head. "Not only me. You are strong, Myra. You never gave up. That is why you survived. That is why your baby is safe." Myra held her child tighter. She realized that true courage came from love and determination. Paul had shown her that humans could be brave and kind, but she had also learned to trust herself and her instincts. Together, they had created a bond that no threat could break. Over the next days, Myra and Paul continued to build their life together. Myra learned more about human ways, while Paul learned about Myra's culture. They shared meals, stories, and laughter. The apartment, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive and full of hope. Myra's child grew stronger, its glow brighter and more constant. Paul marveled at the little one, realizing that love and care could nurture even the most fragile lives. Myra smiled at Paul often, recognizing that he had given them something more than safety. He had given them a home, trust, and hope for the future. One evening, Myra held her baby close and whispered softly, "Friend, human, strong, heart." Paul smiled, understanding fully what she meant. He had not only protected them from danger, but he had shown them what humanity could offer: kindness, courage, and love. In that small apartment, on a planet far from Myra's home, 3 lives had changed forever. The bond they shared was unbreakable. The baby's glow reflected the warmth of their trust. Myra's heart was lighter, knowing that no matter what came next, she and her child had a protector, a friend, and a safe place to grow. Paul looked at them, his heart full. He understood that this was the true gift of humanity: not just survival, but care, compassion, and courage in the face of fear. He had given them shelter and protection, but they had given him something equally powerful: a sense of purpose, connection, and the joy of seeing life thrive. Myra whispered once more to her child, "Safe. Love. Home." And Paul knew that together, they had created something extraordinary. Humanity had shown its best side. It had reached across differences of worlds and species, offering protection, kindness, and the chance to live freely. In that moment, all 3 of them understood the meaning of trust, courage, and love. For Myra, her baby, and Paul, the future was no longer uncertain. It was bright, filled with hope, and built on the courage of one human who had chosen to care when the world might have ignored them. They were safe. They were together. And they would never be alone again.